Just go.
Go.
Go. Oh, now I see it. All right.
Mhm.
Hello, everybody. This is Dr. Jonathan, and once again, coming to you live from Althea Online. Today, a very special person to me, Serene Thinelk. Serene has been in my life for like 30 years now, just about. And Serene is my sister. I consider her my sister. I call her my sister. Many of you have met her dad, our dad, Gene Thinelk, who's been to Althea a few times, I think now, and is quite beloved by the community. And 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 so, there's a wonderful connection there. But just so you know, her sense of humor is much better, and she's actually a very nice person. I'm sorry for that. No, I'm just kidding. So Serene, before we focus on you, I'm gonna do my little intros,
Yes,
and then we're gonna do a little meditating, breathing. This will all take
beautiful.
at the least 45 minutes. So that's a joke. She's like, what? 45 minutes?
I was
I
like,
have a
okay.
I have a life. Okay, so first of all, if you've never been to Althea before, and I think that Serene probably is going to get us some new watchers today because she's so cool and interesting. Althea is kind of a different place that isn't easily comparable to others, um, like a synagogue or a church or a spiritual community. I mean, we are a place where people gather weekly and where people find a sense of community and belonging. But unlike those things, we aren't really a religious organization, and everyone is welcome to follow the path of their own heart, which means people come and they might be Buddhist or Jewish or Christian or atheists or follow the traditional red road. Um, what we share in common is a commitment to the journey and to the understanding that our relationship to spirit and self is some of the most important work that we'll ever do in our lives. So everyone here comes from a different perspective and a different background, and it's fine. We actually like that. I always joke and say that a lot of communities or centers or learning facilities will say, everybody's welcome to join us. And what they really mean is everyone is welcome to become like us. And that's not it. We want to hear all the stories, and we welcome the wholeness of the human experience. So that's a little bit about who and what we are. Now let me give you a few announcements. I'm going to try to knock this all out real quick so we can get chatting. The super, super duper cool thing, and Serene, you got to know about this too. On December 10th, our Winter's Gift annual fundraiser is going online, and we are going to do something amazing, amazing. And no, this is not a joke. We are going to have a live gathering of, I think it's 10 of the world's most influential spiritual teachers. Literally, 5 of these teachers are on the top 100 Watkins Spiritual Most Influential Peoples list. Almost everyone, with the exception of me, has a New York Times bestseller, and certainly everyone has a bestseller, including me. So it's going to be amazing because in 2 hours, you're going to hear from all these talents like Neil Donald Walsh, Greg Braden, Alberto Violdo, Mirabai Starr, Joan Borisenko, Byron Katie. If you look these people up, you'll see they have shaped the landscape of spirituality and healing in the last 50 years. Matthew Fox is another one. When you look them up and you see what they each offer and what they've each accomplished, you will be astonished that you can spend 2 hours hearing their deepest wisdom about what this year 2020 means for us and how we can move consciously into 2021 with our hearts and our minds open to create a new world that's a blessing for all. It's super cool, but it's like 20 days away. So what we want you to do is start signing up now. It's a nonprofit charity dinner. So there is a ticket. Every penny goes to supporting Althea so that we can face the new year with strength, even though we've been shut down because of COVID. at least shut down in person. We are not shut down online. So we love that financial support, but most significantly, this is about bringing a gift to the world and a new vision of how to live the collective consciousness, how to live in a way that will bring a vibrant future for everyone, not just people, but all beings on this planet. Also, we want to ask every one of you listening, when you go to our website and you check it out, there's a Legends and Luminaries page. Take that little URL, copy it at the top, put it in an email, and send it to everybody you know that might enjoy that. Anyone who's scratching their head saying, what the hell just happened in 2020, they can learn something and they can take something away that might heal their heart or change their mind. So please check that out. Now, Tuesdays at noon, Denver Mountain Time, we have a free 2020 recovery group. And I'm leading a facilitated conversation for an hour and a half. Our first one was really powerful. And it's just a time and a place to feel safe processing all the stuff that's gone on this year. Tuesday night, I'm continuing my series on spiritual experiences. And this Tuesday night is the metaphysical nature, this is a long title, of the power, energy, and purpose of being human. I want to see that. There will be no explorations this Thursday. It's Thanksgiving. So however you celebrate it and whatever reasons you celebrate it for, you can spend the day doing that. Our Mariposa program, our LGBTQ program that hosts diversity dialogues. The first diversity dialogue will be on Zoom, December 2nd. Look that up online. Joni Klieger has an incredible, powerful new program coming up called Once Upon a Time, about looking at how we tell stories about our life, how we share stories about our life, and that promises to be really powerful. I should say, by the way, Tim's Diversity Dialogue, December 2nd, is a reflection on World AIDS Day, which I think is December 1st. And finally, we're almost there, Serene. We've almost done all the announcements. This is how it goes every week. As you enter the holidays, think of Althea. Like I'm like a TV show here, right? I'm the commercial, I'm the announcer. So we have an online nonprofit account at Amazon, so you can shop at Amazon, and Althea benefits. That's super cool. It works for Whole Foods as well. You can get King Soopers cards and Kroger cards. That benefits Althea. And of course, we're always welcoming your financial donations during our services, or you could become an Evergreen member. You know about all that stuff. So please, let's stay connected. Keep your eyes open. We're going to do lots of fun online stuff for the month of December so people don't feel lonely and disconnected. There are lots of things to celebrate. And the fact that we can do this online means that we can bring amazing people like Serene into our circle. So having said that, you got the announcements, check out the website, read the newsletter. Let's take a breath. Let's slow down and let's get ready for this important conversation. So I'm going to invite you to close your eyes, wherever you are, whoever you are, and take a long, slow, deep breath in through your nose. Hold it for just a moment and notice anywhere you might be feeling tension or tightness, busyness of the mind or emotion, and then just breathe it all out, all the tension, all the busyness, and feel yourself slowing down and settling down. You can repeat that, breathing in through the nose, deeply, softly, holding it for a moment, and just releasing whatever doesn't serve you. Tiredness, confusion, control. Feel your body soften. Your mind and heart begin to open. And as we connect with this stillness, we connect with that spirit of life that is everywhere with us and within us. We are nourished by each other's presence. No matter where we are when we listen to this, and no matter when, we are as one. And we pray each in our own way, but together as one, to the one that is all, to our source, our substance, Creator, dear God, and all those who watch over us and the natural powers. We give thanks for this day and all the ways we are nourished in heart and mind, body and soul. We are grateful for connection and community and all the ways that Spirit speaks to us and through us. As we move into this so-called Thanksgiving week, may we turn our attention towards gratitude. Gratitude for each and every experience of life that has brought us to this moment. For in this moment we have choice, we have love, we have wisdom, and we have each other. And through this journey, may we each unfold the radiant being that we are. May we connect with the love and wisdom that is beyond us. The love and wisdom that lives in the natural world, that is carried by our ancestors, that is the very energy that pulses at the heart of all things. And through this knowing, may we each and all be a radiant blessing in this world, bringing peace and hope and wholeness to all who we connect with, to each other, ourselves, and all worlds. For all these things and the prayers and blessings that remain unspoken in our hearts, together we say, Amen. All right. Serene, welcome.
Thank you.
So Serene is coming to us live from Sioux Falls,
Yes, Sioux Falls.
South Dakota, the COVID capital. I'm sorry. There, it's a
Yeah,
bad joke.
it's
So
true.
before we get into some deeper questions, how are you and how has your family and your community managed this year?
We're doing really well. My family, we're doing good. We had to go through a moment of quarantine because of one of our family members having direct exposure somewhere, but we all tested negative. We're doing well, doing our best to try to still go to work and school and all the things we have to do, but remaining as safe as we can. And as you said, in South Dakota, I think we're kind of known for the most part in the news for the lack of direction and leadership about how to go about the pandemic. And so a lot of people are sort of making up their own guidelines and rules and things. But amidst all of that, we're doing well. And my mom and dad are staying in and keeping themselves safe. They're both such hard workers and give so much to everyone all the time. I think that at first was a challenge, but now they're seeing it's important. And we're seeing it's important. We so badly wanted to have the holidays with them, but we know it's not a smart move. And so we're all just kind of staying in our separate places for the holidays. So things are going well amidst everything that's happening. There's a lot of loss in our community. And that has been very, very hard to see people that I am close with lose their parents, or dear colleagues of mine who've passed on. And so I feel like today I'm sort of still holding some of that grief and sadness, but also trying to stay focused on how to kind of live out some of those teachings that they gave me, or that I observed from them, I should say. as my mom and dad talk about, the best way to be like a living memorial for them is to do your best to try to take the teachings that they gave you or that you observed and live that. So just kind of holding both of those things right now.
Yeah. So one of the things I'm going to say as an aside to the people that are listening and watching is that, first of all, one of the things I know about Serene and her great wisdom is that she's always very humble and is the first one to say she doesn't speak for anyone and she doesn't represent, Native people in general or women in general or healers in general, but she is all these things. And to me, you're such a special person, not just because I know you and I love you and so on, but you have always, I'm going to just say this about you, you've always had a gift for the healer's way, and you've always had a natural connection to teaching and healing. But what's really unique about you is that you have explored healing in a lot of settings. So I know you also as a music therapist, really. I know you as someone who's studied conventional Western treatment and worked in Western facilities and even trained and worked, in Boston, was it?
Yeah.
And then, of course, you're very involved in your own culture and traditions as a Lakota, Dakota. I guess your mom's family is also Nakota, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
I remember Grandma Ina had that N
Yes.
sound. And then you're also kind of an interesting, if you don't mind me say this, you're kind of an interesting age. Now, I'm not going to say what your age is exactly. I don't know what it is exactly, but I can kind of guess, because you're kind of at this interesting generational point between like people like me that are still pretty heavily marked by the way our parents and grandparents did things, but you're also still really close to this new wave of consciousness, millennials and whatever you call that next group of people. You're probably a millennial technically, I guess. I don't know. Are you a millennial?
I don't even know.
I don't think so. I don't know what that is. But the point is, I see your life at the intersection of so many roads.
Mm.
And so the first question is, before I ask you the big questions, do you feel that about your own story? Do you see yourself as standing at the intersection of many roads? And what's that like for you in a year like 2020, where all these roads are like clashing and converging? I mean, age, politics, native, non-native, new consciousness, old consciousness. What's it look like from where you stand?
I kind of like how you frame that up. That's an interesting way of putting it. I guess I hadn't really conceptualized it that way, but I think when I look at it through that lens, I can see that. I think that it's a very full experience. It's a full experience, being that I feel first and foremost just grateful, especially not only with our teachings, but also what I'm seeing in the world and how many people are suffering and struggling. And I think to myself, all of the ancestors before me and what they went through for me to just even be existing right now. So it comes from a place of just being incredibly grateful. But I do feel like there is, if I'm really being honest and transparent, I think that there's this piece of fear that the old ways and the things that have sustained our spirits, like our language and our ways of life and traditional teachings, my fear is that some of those are being lost. So there's that piece, right? There's this piece of fear. But so I have to acknowledge that. But and paired with that is also when I talk to some of the elders about it, of, I'm scared, when your generation journeys on home, I feel this this strong excitement, but also this heavy feeling of what if we don't get it right? What if we can't continue the things on? And they always say spirit finds a way, through dreams, through you have to slow down and listen and pray and ask for guidance. But paired with that spirituality, you also have to put in the day-to-day walk and the day-to-day learning. You have to set aside that time to learn your language, to learn those stories, to do that. And so it's such a balance, but I think it's a very mixed thing. But I think underlying like the foundation is just this gratitude of being alive in this day and age, you know, and this particular moment in history is a really interesting thing. I do feel like the shift in consciousness is happening. And anytime there's such a major shift, people are going to experience that in very different ways. And I think on a very human level, power dynamics are starting to shift a bit. And so some of those people who maybe didn't even know that they held some of that power or privilege
Right.
are struggling with that. And there's this empowerment with Indigenous people and, you know, people of color and women and people who were formerly didn't even have a place like in movies or in TV or, you know, didn't have a voice in general. And so it's a powerful thing to witness. But the backlash or the people who don't understand that shift, that's a tough thing to watch, you know.
So, okay, so you just hit on something that's so important to me. I was hoping to talk about. Um, so in my experience, and you know, I've been around, you know, hanging out in Indigenous communities for a very long time since I was a teenager.
Mhm.
And it was always difficult for me not to see that the same things that you're afraid of for your community, I think we should all be afraid of for the whole world, right? Like
Mhm.
the loss of all of our languages, all of our ceremonies, the dignity of our unique cultures, and the way we connect in small communities, that we're all going to somehow move into these distracted lifestyles that are, you know, just lost in screens and striving and material focus and so on. And so I think for the people that feel we need a new worldview in the dominant mainstream culture, I think part of what you're acknowledging is that there are a lot of people that are now looking towards all kinds of communities of color,
Mhm.
Native people, Black American people, Hispanic communities, and so on. And I also think what I think I heard you say is part of that is the final, not final, the beginning of a deeper recognition of a power imbalance and people wanting to share and learn and say, okay, step forward. What do you need? And how do we work together? How do you stay represented? But at the same time, I think I also hear that it's not just about equality of communities, but the fact that the mainstream culture needs the wisdom and experience of all these communities. The Me Too movement, the LGBTQ movement, the Native Pride movement, that we're not going to be a whole culture without. And I wonder if you can speak a little bit to that, either experience or balance, or how do you see that kind of weird interplay between a mainstream society that is mostly, again, let's be honest, ignored, downplayed, and overlooked the needs of especially Native people, but all kinds of communities of color. And now all of a sudden it's like, oh, right, of course, you're important too. And we want good things for you. And we never didn't. We just were too stupid to know what we were doing. And then more, oh, and by the way, I think we're sinking this ship. Could you help save it? What's that all about? I mean, do you see that? Do you see it the same way?
Yeah.
And how do you live through that? What does that feel like?
Yeah, you know, that it just elicits so many thoughts and emotions because I think yeah, and it's not just the downplaying or ignoring, it's the very purposeful
Yeah.
oppression and genocide and taking away rights, you know, is what the whole idea of America was built upon.
Yeah.
And so I think sometimes if we don't look at those roots, just as in our own personal healing, you know, we really try sometimes, I think, to jump ahead to the, oh, now that we have this awareness, let's just be really spiritual and be very
Right.
aware and make changes. And you have to be able to be in the now and think about how can we be solution focused, but you also have to slow down and listen to stories and
Mhm.
be open, and not let, for some people I say, don't let your white guilt get in the way of just being present. You can feel that, experience it, but just learn how to be present. And you don't have to raise up Native people or people of color. We're already here. We don't need to be empowered by anyone else. It's just about creating space. And
Mhm.
I think in that simple act of just acknowledging and being present with one another, those things can start to shift in a really beautiful way. Yeah.
Yeah, that's beautifully said. You know, again, just through my own experience and looking at places I've spent a lot of time, like South Africa,
Hmm.
that lived through apartheid and is still healing through it every day, every day. You know, sometimes as we go through 2020, I share that kind of, I don't know what the emotion is like. Well, it's a mixed feeling, right? Of this hopefulness and I don't know, stress, anxiety. I don't know what it is, but the concern that people think that, oh, now that the issues are on the table, we can all just move forward.
Right.
And something that has been painfully put in place over hundreds of years
Mhm.
is not going to take a couple of years to wash away.
Mhm.
Now, having said that, through your work and then some of your work in Generation Red Road, which we're going to talk about in a minute,
Yeah.
do you see some parallels in what works for healing community and the lived experience of genocide and cultural um, suffocation and lessons for this broader dialogue right now? I mean, do the lessons transfer? Are there things that you know are necessary to the communities that are healing that might be valuable to the bigger society as well? Or are they really different stories? Are they different processes?
Yeah. I think I think they're very different stories, but the thing that I love about our life ways, and I think you've experienced this from the first time you pulled up in your truck as a teenager, being like, "Hey, I heard about this guy named Gene Thinnock, and I'm studying Indigenous healing." And I mean, from that moment, you see that. I mean, we didn't really know you, right? But we came to know you, and you became a part of our family. You are my brother, and you're my mom and dad's son. Like that, it's amazing to me that the teaching of being a relative um, to one another is what has sustained us through all of the historical trauma that we've been through. And I think that that teaching alone, that sense of community, and when you slow down and say, how can I be a good relative? How can I live thinking about the next generation? Not just how can I make the most money so that I can be set and then set my kids up. That's important too, right? But it's what we say in the Lakota way is when you leave this earth and you go on into the spiritual world, the spirit world, you take with you the nourishment from your spirit. So the spirit food is the way that we treat one another, the kindness that we give and we receive. And we can really only fully experience ourselves by being a relative. We see ourselves reflected back by the things that people say to us, give to us. When they hurt, we hurt. So when you really boil it all down, it's about not feeling alone, and it's
Mhm.
about feeling connected, even when you're not physically with someone. That's the power of like Indigenous consciousness. I feel like is you can feel very lost, but if you really slow down and listen, one, that your ancestors are with you, and two, you can look outside at the tree and see yourself reflected in that, not in some like crazy like oh spiritual way, but like just the very nature of being, in
Mhm.
that space. And so I think being a good relative is something that comes really natural in the Indigenous way and has sustained us and will continue to sustain us. Now, that being said, there is a lot of lateral oppression amongst one another because of the historical trauma and things in the boarding schools and everything that has happened. I feel like we've internalized the belief of the colonizer. And so that internalized oppression transfers to lateral oppression, and oftentimes we aren't aware of it. And so we have all this compounded trauma. It's not just our own personal traumas that happen in our life, it's also systemic oppression, right? And so there's all these layers to it. But I think that the overarching teaching that you're right, there's a lot of people that are saying, now that I know and fully understand what has happened historically, like the knowledge is here, but my heart hurts. And what can we do to help? And I think that's a beautiful intention, and that's a beautiful way of looking at it. And I think sometimes it's an impossible thing to answer. You know, when you have that question, it's like, gosh, there's so many things. There's policy change that you can advocate for. There's just creating space at the table, you know, because of that, you know, that power and privilege that you may have where it's mostly white males around a board table or something like that. So, and not trying to culturally appropriate. I think that's something that is very triggering for Native people, where it's like, man, our ancestors literally went underground to keep these ceremonies alive. And so it wasn't until 1978 that we could do that legally.
Yeah.
And so my grandmas and grandpas, they all had to do this in a way that felt unsafe at times because, you know, it was seen as being witchcraft or whatever it was believed to be. And so to come into a space and say, oh, I really like that about your culture, so I'm going to take that to this community and do this because I was around a Native person one time, or you know, something like that.
I read a book.
Yeah. And so it's beautiful to take in the things that, because we invite, you know, people into our space that we know have that good intention and heart, that we know aren't going to go and take that out and try to do something with that, or it's just about the experience in that very moment of being connected and how that nourishes our spirit. So there's so many levels to this. So I'll just stop right there.
Oh my gosh, but it's so good. I'm so with you on everything you said. And two things I want to say, just kind of to affirm, but not to teach you anything, but more for the people that are listening. The first thing is, you know, when it comes to cultural appropriation, because, you know, it's something I feel I've had to talk to people about a lot over the years, and I've always been at the edge of, because sometimes people know my involvement in Native communities and will say, well, why won't you do this for us or that for us? Or, and I'll say, or they'll tell me their story. I went to a workshop. I swear to God, if I had like $10 for every time someone said, oh my gosh, I went to a workshop this weekend, I'm a shaman now. And I'm like, what? What kind of drugs did they give you? It's like nobody I know that's was, you know, born and raised in a traditional community as a shaman ever wanted to be that. That's like shit you run from. Anyway, so the reframe that I offer though is, well, the traditions that you're inspired by are earth-based traditions. And that's something you can cultivate without taking something from someone else. You can cultivate your own relationship with the earth, with your own ancestors. And if you're influenced by Indigenous people, you know, that can be a real part of a life, but you always only speak for yourself. It's your own lived experience, and you're not somehow more sacred because you've labeled yourself, you know, something Native, or because you know you spun the wheel. I don't know if you ever heard that Thomas King radio show. He's a First Nations author in Canada, and he used to have a Dead Dog Cafe radio show. You got to look it up. So they were all, you know, Native on the show, but they would joke about having callers, people call in for an Indian name. And he said they would have two wheels, like, okay, we're in the studio and we're going to spin the first wheel. And it was always like an adjective, like running, sitting, jumping, you know, squatting, fighting. And then it was an animal was the other one. And it's like, okay, send your $15 in, you know, it's like squatting bear or flying frog or something. Anyway, the point is, I think I'm being playful, but you're calling people's attention to the fact that, yes, we need the earth-based traditions to thrive, but we don't need to steal or borrow
Mhm.
or appropriate from
Mhm.
people whose lived experience of this interrelationship, um, for people who've had such suffering and loss and pain.
Right.
Um, the other thing you said, though, that I wanted to highlight for people, because this is really cool. Oh my gosh, do you remember Mandaza from when you went to India?
Yes.
Mandaza was on a previous Sunday. And
Wow.
guess what? When
What?
I asked him about wisdom for this generation and what's going to help heal the community, the world as it is, he said almost the exact same thing you did.
Hmm.
He said to move into the paradigm of relationship,
Mm.
right? You said see the world as your family.
Mhm.
That's a big lesson. How can I be a good relative? And the way he put it was, when we start to learn to see ourselves
Mm.
in each other,
Wow.
that what we do to you, I do to me.
Mhm.
So let me go on with another question for you, now that I've rambled a bit. With COVID-19, what have you heard or seen going on in Native communities relative to coping with the, the very real loss and stress and threat in the communities, and the fact that so many of the ceremonies
Mhm.
that keep the communities strong are the kinds of things that people can't do now,
Mhm.
or in theory shouldn't do?
Right.
Being in a small sweat lodge, sitting in a circle together. I mean, so much of what I experience Native community to be, whether it's Navajo or Ho-Chunk or whatever, it's close and it's intimate and it's family and it's vulnerable. What do you know? How are communities dealing with this? And what is ceremonial life like? I mean, we missed Sundance for the first time ever this year.
Right. Right. Yeah, I think, people have responded differently to it. I think there are some people who continue to go into sweat with maybe just their close family, people they're around all the time. Um, so there's that. And I think during the summer, there were some people who continued to have Sundance and others that didn't. But I think right now, fast forward from like July to where we are now, I think most people know that it's just spreading, it's peaking so high. And so what I'm hearing and seeing on like Facebook and people sharing is that it's incredibly hard. It's kind of like a form of grief, something that they felt so connected to, that helps to sustain them and to feel connected. It's like a sense of loss, because it's like they want to go to that place that they know that is safe and healing, but they're unable to. And so just, I think the act of simply sharing that is important for people, so that they can, I think if anything, it's brought a lot of awareness of how meaningful those things and how important it is for us to continue those life ways. I also, talking to my dad, he talked about the power of the ceremony within us, and how,
Mm.
he's a practitioner of these ceremonies, or he's someone who believes in them, and has found so much of his own healing. And our family has been through a lot of different things and have come so far. It's a work in progress always, but I think through these lifeways have found forgiveness and have found a way forward. And so without those things, many of us would feel lost. So he believes in those things. My mom does. We do as a people who follow those traditional ways. However, right now we can't do those things, and so it's brought us back to sit with ourselves in new ways that we never imagined. I think we would have to, because it's not just ourselves going through it. Everyone is going through this together. And so he talks about the ceremony within. Every single day, how do you live your life as a good relative? You use what you can, use your medicines, a bitter root. You need to, make medicine for the tea. If you need to burn sage or pick cedar or whatever it is, do those things, but know that all of the things that you seek in those places, you can find within, and even just connecting to one another through prayer, conversation. Just every moment, every breath is sacred, you know, and I think sometimes we forget that and lose sight of it and are looking for those peak experiences to help us, which those things we will continue, but for now we can't.
So I want to go a little deeper into what you just said, because there's something very powerful there. Find the ceremony within you. And I think about your work as a therapist, you know,
Mhm.
and I guess the question is, do you feel that there is a time when you work with people in which they themselves, in even in Western therapeutic settings, where they have to kind of move the empowerment they've felt from you
Mm.
or from the facility or from the program into themselves?
Mhm.
And is that a conscious part of those programs, or is that something that we all just kind of have to face when we check out? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it seems there's a parallel in what's being asked of people to find the ceremony within, that happens in a lot of other settings. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do. I think that same premise is applicable to the healing work in general. You know, clearly nothing is recreates like the actual life ways, but I think the beauty and intent of it can be practiced in our daily life, you know, and I think that is true. It's very insightful how you put it, because I do think that we need, to me, I mean, people call it like a teacher, but what I found as I've gotten older is there's teachers everywhere, everywhere you go. I used to think when I was younger that, oh, this person has so much knowledge, and I still value my elders and people, and I take something, but I learned something so much. I mean, from my clients, you know, the people that I work with, they teach me so much. And I think if we just look at that as an opportunity to see, even if someone challenges you, what are they teaching me? Something is coming up inside of me. How do I be present with that? So just projecting anger onto them and saying, it's all you, this and that. It's like, what's coming up, you know, within me. And so in the process of therapy and the circle work we do at Generation Red Road and all of those things, it's about presenting a teaching, really, an Indigenous teaching, and offering skills, and then saying, what do you think of this? You know, how does this relate to you? Because if you don't relate to it, then it's just up here, you know. And so with that, they take it. And the point is to integrate and just hold space. To me, the most healing happens when you are just present and witnessing someone's experience. I think so much of my work as a therapist is I truly honor the people that I sit across from. I honor them. I look at, you know, their stuckness or their progress or wherever they're at, and I'm just with them in that moment. And sure, I reflect things back, we set goals. But I feel so honored. Some people found some healing from trauma that they carried, just so much shame, and were able to release that and let that go. And by the end of treatment, they're able to say, thank you. I don't think I need to come to you anymore, you know?
Yeah.
And it feels like they've internalized this belief in themselves without me saying, you're amazing, you're going to be okay. Sure, encouraging, but it's a knowing. It's a knowing at that point.
Yeah, and actually I just had like an aha as you finished, that part of the gift of witnessing people the way you're talking about, to be so present and holding them with your kind of loving attention and just letting, you know, holding them, letting them process whatever. I think that is one of the ways that people move the external powers and influences internally.
Mm-hmm.
They realize they're the ones leading the healing.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So they keep going back to you, back to you, back to you, until they realize, damn, I'm the one doing all the talking. I'm the one doing all the realizing, right? So I want to fit in a few more things before we run out of time. and it's just too many things, really. I wonder, I'm kind of tempted to ask you a trauma-related question,
Okay.
but it's such a big topic and there's other things to get into. But, I've really wondered a lot about the impact of 2020 on trauma survivors, communities of trauma, individuals, and partly, for a variety of reasons, as I think we know, a lot of people who have survived trauma or live with, trauma, PTSD, having a predictable environment can be very helpful.
Mhm.
Having some control over their schedule and influences can be very helpful. Not being destabilized again and again can be very
Right.
helpful. And yet, for people of all backgrounds and nationalities, there are, trauma survivor. I mean, some level, we're all trauma survivors, but there's all kinds of levels of trauma everywhere. And this year has got to be one massive aggravating factor, right?
Mhm.
I mean,
Absolutely.
so what do you see or experience or think about this interplay? Because it's nice to talk about 2020 as the springboard of learning and we're all going to come together, but this has got to feel like a massive setback for a lot of people.
Oh, absolutely.
I don't
Yeah,
know.
I think, yeah, no, I think that's really good, a good thing to talk about, because a lot of people who, well, I mean, basic things, especially people who live, don't have access to healthcare or access to mental health or substance use services. Some treatment centers aren't accepting people because of COVID. So I've definitely seen a lot of people struggle with relapse, and so substance use has been a huge thing, and people falling back into addiction. Um, so that's one thing that I've really noticed that has been hard for people. And I think, yeah, it's especially for people who have a trauma history or the epigenetics of some of that interwoven experience, traumatic experience in your DNA. I think some of those things are triggered. You feel like you don't have any control or predictability. There's no particular end in sight. We're talking about vaccine, but back in the summer, it was sort of like, is this going away? Is this staying? I think one thing in healing trauma or working through it is first identifying that what your triggers are and what's coming up for you. So it takes a lot of trust in yourself to be able to self-soothe and become aware. And once you know what your most of your triggers are, you can take space. You can call a friend. You can pray, you can do music. I mean, there's so many things that I feel like you need to do instead of just being reactive, instead of
Yeah.
shutting down, running away, doing something. It's like, whew, I have to breathe through this. And so in that way, it is forcing people to do that. But let's face it, not a lot of people have the resources internally or externally to be able to manage that. And so it can be very hard for a lot of people. They're triggered, isolation.
So on that note, I wondered if you could just give us a quick snapshot of Generation Red Road, just for people who heard you mention it, and I'm really proud of what you guys are doing. Just like what is that?
Sure.
What's it about?
Okay.
How does it
Yeah.
help?
Sure. So Generation Red Road is it's an Indigenous nonprofit, and my significant other and I, Carlos Rivera, have co-founded that. And we co-founded it with the intention of addressing intergenerational trauma and how that comes through within our family systems and then affects us individually, but also how historical trauma is really a systemic thing. And how do we learn how to be helpers with some of those systems still in place? How do we really reclaim some of those old teachings that maybe were lost, through intentionally trying to eradicate our culture, and say, let's remember some of these things. We're already kind of living that way, but how do we identify and say, yes, you're right. This is something that we can use that's culturally, it's ours, and from there, how do we change within ourselves as professionals and then help others? So we do a lot of training for professionals, Native professionals who feel kind of siloed in their different communities in the US.
Mm-hmm.
And so we do a little bit of personal development. in our circles. We really want to create safe spaces for people. But we also really focus on the skill part. How do you take these skills as a Native person working with other Native people and help them to get through and find the red road, which in our way, Chankuluta, the red road is a path of wellness. It's there all the time. It's within us. It's about a road of trying to do your best to find that balance.
So when you look at your, now this is kind of an awful question that I'm going to ask you.
Okay.
But I, it's our context, right? So there's people listening that are just happy to hear anything you have to say because you're, a fascinating person and, wise and all these good things. Some people are looking for a better understanding about Native experience. Some people are trying to understand themselves and they want to know, this is all very good, but what's in it for me? and I know that's something we touched on at the beginning, which is, okay, as we start to finally see some mainstream recognition of the painful history, let's just go slow on jumping into, oh, and by the way, even though we stole your boat, put you in the bottom of it, tried to sail it, fucked it up, and then suddenly called you back to the top, and now we want you to save the boat.
Mm-hmm.
Having said all that, are there lessons that you feel that as many times as you are immersed in them in Indigenous community or Native communities, that your heart keeps telling you, man, this is for everyone. Like, boy, if we could only remember this, if we could only all remember that. If you had a weekend with Joe Biden, what you would hope to impart, or a weekend with Oprah, or a weekend with, any human being for that matter. Are there some core lessons in your work that you wish for humanity?
Absolutely. I think, you often hear that saying, we're spiritual beings having a physical experience. And I think it's human nature to get so wrapped up in one or the other, right? Like you have your activists and people on the ground, and they're just hammering away every day at the small issues in their community, and maybe not so much paying attention to slowing down and the spiritual part of it. And then you have other people who are really focused on oneness and moving forward. And I think it has to be a balance. It has to be a balance of those two things. We need people of all colors. I want to advocate for all people to get better access to things, healthcare, missing, murdered Indigenous women. It doesn't have to be just Native people advocating for these issues. To bring awareness and all these different institutions, no matter where you are, I think is incredibly important. So everyone has a space, everyone has a voice, and everyone has a place to create change. The one thing that I see sometimes is when, especially white individuals, that when they hear and they acknowledge and they're so respectful, sometimes the shame can get in the way then, or that guilt where they feel like, gosh, I'm not worthy, or I don't have a place, or, well, yes, you do, because that's in the end, that's what the medicine wheel is, right? It's those 4 directions. It's looking at people from all directions. We are all relevant. We are all here together on earth. And there's been such a painful history, but that it doesn't stop there. It doesn't have to stop there. Right now it's kind of uncomfortable because we're shifting that consciousness, but we are in this together. And we do have to be mindful of things like cultural appropriation and things, but in general, I mean, I feel really blessed because the way my mom and dad and grandma, my Uchi, everyone brought us up was to be so loving and to accept everyone. And they always said, everyone has a place in the circle. Everyone, no matter what color. And so I truly do, because that teaching has guided me to be proud of where I come from and who I am, but also to not judge other people, no matter where they are. And the last thing I'll say about this is teaching we all, I think, need to remember is that having uncomfortable, vulnerable conversations about where we are in that exact moment. Maybe it's during a meeting and you feel like someone did or said something that triggered something about being Native or white, and just saying, this is how I'm feeling right now about this when you did or said that. Now, one thing is sometimes when non-Native people feel that guilt, they come to you and almost want you to work through that for them or with them. And I would say if your intention is just to share where you're at, that's beautiful. And making it clear that I'm not saying this to you for you to fix it. I'm letting you know I see you, and I want to be a relative to you still, so to speak, right? I see you, and this is how I'm feeling. I'm here. So there
Oh my gosh, Serene, there was so much in what you just said. I would love to take another hour and pick out all these pieces. So many things. Two things that really hit me. I just want to repeat them for people and then ask you one last question.
Sure. Yeah.
I love what I kind of feel as the masculine feminine balance, not male female, but masculine feminine, active reflective, that the way you talked about the significance, that probably the way forward for us is neither only being super spiritual and you can pray it all away and meditate it all away, nor only being active and aggressive and making change, but they've got to be a balance in every person, that we all need to take a look at our influence, but have it rooted in spirit. I just love that. The other thing that you said that just kind of actually blew my mind is that I connected what you were saying about listening to each other's feelings and having those difficult conversations, and something that I frankly failed to acknowledge all year for the probably hundreds of people that have talked with me, around me, about how difficult this political race has been. And the thing that people have always brought to me is, well, my relatives are like this and I'm like this, or my neighbor's like this and I'm like this. And the conversation always centers around who can convince who of what.
Yeah.
Or even I made peace by just letting them think differently than me, but almost never did the conversation turn to owning our feelings about what's going on. But what I feel about your political party, what I feel about my political party, and just hearing what's coming up. Well, why are you feeling fear? As opposed to labeling it and making the other person wrong. So your comment about being willing to have the difficult conversations, to be with them and not even fix them, is such a powerful gift, I think, to people listening. And it is a way forward. Having said that, the last question. You have 4 beautiful kids, right?
Yes.
What gives you hope? That, I don't know how to say this because it kind of makes me want to cry, it makes me want to laugh, that this whole thing's not just going to hell in the next 50 years. I have kids too. And I have moments where I think, my God, they could be part of this amazing future. And then I think, my God, they may die of toxic air poisoning because we just don't get it right in the next 50 years.
Right.
What gives you hope? What gives us? Why should we be hopeful, Serene?
Okay. Yeah.
Bring it
So
home.
technically I have 7 because Carlos and I blended families. So we have 7 kiddos. The older 3 are adults now, but I think one powerful thing I learned from my daughter, again, she's my teacher. She went through some medical, she's been diagnosed with an autoimmune disorder. And seeing her go through some of the things that she's gone through in the past 3 years have completely changed me as a human being. When you can't control what happens to your children, even though that's everything inside of you that thinks that, oh, if I do this, if I do that, and if I do that, if I just redirect. And then when you come to a place where you realize nothing I do or say can take this away. it was a process of grieving, of anger, of what did I do, of I can't take away when kids tease her at school and she comes home and cries in my arms at night. I can't take away that you're going to be dealing with this for the rest of your life. She taught me that that is her path. And I have to honor that. There's only so much I can teach and control. And so, as scared as I get sometimes, the only thing I do have control over, so to speak, is how I take care of myself so that I can be present with them and not projecting all of my fears onto them. And saying, you are your own spiritual being. Your spirit came here onto earth and you're going to experience something. This is your path and I'm a part of it, and I don't know what that means. And that's scary sometimes. But it's also very exciting because they just surprise the heck out of me sometimes with the things that they can overcome. So.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
I'm so grateful for you.
I'm grateful for you.
And yeah, and I'm so proud.
Thank you, brother.
So we're going to wrap up here in a minute. And if you need to go, you're welcome to. Do you have to go?
No, I can stay.
Okay,
Yeah.
so just we'll take a couple minutes here. I
Okay.
want to thank everyone who tuned in. People watch this after, it's recorded and we have that out there. And gosh, listening to Serene today, I think, holy cow, I hope you listen to some of these things more than once. I will. Don't forget all that junk that I promoted in the beginning. You can go online and see our classes, read the newsletter when you get it. We have Mariposa's Diversity Dialogue reflecting on World AIDS Day. We have Joni's new class, Once Upon a Time. We have all kinds of ways you can contribute to Althea. We're grateful for the donations you're making today for this Sunday gathering. And please, please, please get your ticket for Winter's Gift. There's only so many that we can sell, and we hope that you'll help us promote it, like spread the word, very much in the spirit of what Serene said. This is just a really ripe time of learning, and it is hard. It is hard for a lot of people to find hope and resilience and the wisdom within. We really think this event's going to help people, so check that out. To close, Serene, something that this community makes a part of their gatherings, it's one of the only things that we do that's kind of a tradition in a structured way, is that there is a statement of being. It's like an affirmative prayer.
Mm-hmm.
And this community was founded 130 years ago, which in American terms is pretty old. Native terms is pretty young. European terms, it's like, what? Around here, that's old. And it was actually founded by a group of women healers. And it was their experience to wake up to the realization that God is not this being like a man that we are in a subservient relationship to, but God is really the spirit of life, that God is energy and essence and consciousness. And because God is that loving presence and energy and wisdom that's everywhere, then there's nothing that's outside of spirit. And that we are spiritual beings in whatever dimension we travel. Nothing changes that. And so this is we're going to read this to close. And I'm just going to invite everyone who's listening. Again, thank you for being here, Serene. Thank you a million. And why don't we take a moment to close our eyes? With a deep breath, we can kind of release the busyness of the mind that is activated. And let's just take this moment to pause and sit within our hearts, and to feel and affirm our interconnection. And we be grateful for this day and all the ways that we can love and learn and let go. through our breath. May we feel gratitude for each other in this family of life. And if you're out there and you remember our statement of being, you can say it with me. God is all, both invisible and visible. One presence, one mind, one power is all. This one that is all is perfect life, perfect love, and perfect substance. And we are individualized expressions of God and are ever one with this perfect life, perfect love, and perfect substance. So, thank you, one and all. Thank you, Serene. Love and blessings to your family and our community out there. And I hope we get to see you soon.
Yes, I hope so too.
Yeah. All right. Take care. Thank you. Thank you.